Hello, this is Todd Luck, and this is a video on my haul for Free Comic Book Day. So today's Free Comic Book Day. That is a day that comic book publishers will offer free comics to let people have a sample of the different series that they put out. And so I got several free comics. There's usually a limit that you can get. I wasn't that much into what was being put out this year. I'm sure there's some good stuff in there, but I'm just not like really pumped about it. I just got a lot of other stuff going on. And I had other interest in going out and taking advantage of the sales and the other giveaways that they had, which I'll be getting to in a minute. But you can see the free comic books I've got. Pretty typical stuff. We got Avengers, we got Spider-Man, we got Robotech, which is new this year, Street Fighter with their traditional offering, Teenage Mutant Ninja Turtles, once again, has a free comic book. Down here, a couple new ones for this year. Vampirilla, which is celebrating her 50th anniversary. She is a vampire, so she ages very well. And Ignition, which is kicking off some kind of new indie superhero universe. And I think Mark Waid is writing something in that comic, so I just want to check that out. I will read these later. I haven't gotten around to it yet. It's only been a few hours, and right now I'm trying to suffer through Ultraman on Netflix so I can do a review of that one. So that video will be coming up, so like and subscribe and all that good stuff. So first of all, that's the free comic books, but you always get extra stuff thrown in there. Comic shops have way more supply than they have demand sometimes for comics, so they'll throw in comics that they just have too many copies of that they just need to get rid of. And so I always find that interesting what Selfish puts in the bag. And so I got #1 for Wolverine, which is really cool. This is looks like a really good comic book, so the artwork is fantastic. And then a couple Valiant comics. This is the Book of Death #1, Selfish exclusive variant, and a Selfish exclusive variant of Faith. I've gotten both of these before. I think they've probably given them away before because I don't, well, probably for Faith at least, because I don't think I would have that otherwise. Book of Death I did get on my own because that does involve the new version, the current modern version of Master Dark, who I've just never been able to really get into the new Valiant stuff that much. I've tried it out, it just never really clicked for me. However, on Valiant, what I recommend is getting the early comics from the 1990s, back when Jim Shooter was writing them. If you can get a reading guide of the stuff Jim Shooter put out in the first couple years, it is amazing. It is probably the best ongoing series is ever put out in the comic book industry. It is fantastic stuff. That's my recommendations on Valiant. But anyway, as far as why I went out there, it was actually one reason, and it is this Hellboy tote bag. And I'm actually going to back up a little bit just so you can see how big this sucker is. This thing is huge, and it's black and white on this yellow bag, and it's just beautiful. Absolutely wonderful. And the back has, you know, the big Dark Horse logo. And so I knew that they had these bags, and I knew I had to get one. So that was fantastic. Some other Hellboy swag they were giving out is leftovers from Hellboy Day, and including this poster by Mike Mignola. And this is amazing because a lot of these characters in this poster are from the spin-offs from Hellboy, which he doesn't draw typically. And so it's really cool to see his take on all these characters that are in his universe. So this is really cool. And on the back is information on the Hellboy timeline. So this is actually some really cool stuff. And then as an added bonus, like that wasn't enough, are these temporary tattoos. And included in there is this one. And this is actually a reproduction of Mike Mignola's first sketch of Hellboy. This was just like a concept he had in his head that he just put down on paper. And of course, he eventually developed it into, something else entirely. But it's still really cool to get like this little image as something that you can keep in your collection. Classic Comics, the other comic shop in my city, gave away some posters, and I got one for Infinity War. Of course, this is the one for the movie, which is pretty dang cool. And then there's this poster, which I thought was Avengers #1, but it's actually some kind of swipe of that cover or recreation of it, because it puts in a new character in there called Voyager, and I don't know what this is. If anyone has any idea what this poster is of, let me know. I have no idea. But what's really cool is on the freaking back of this. This, friends, is George Perez artwork. This is George Perez for Avengers No Surrender. Oh my Lord, look at all that. Look at all those characters. This is what George Perez is known for. It is frickin' amazing. And I know what you're asking, but Todd, did you actually buy anything while you were out? And the answer is yes. Yes, I did. For one thing, at Selfish Comics, I found Ahsoka. This is the outfit that Ahsoka wears in Clone Wars for most of the series. And I have looked for this figure for probably about 10 years, I think it's been. Never saw it on store shelves, but now I actually own older Ahsoka. I'm not sure how exactly what to call it. I think she was still teens, but she was just a bit older in the last half of Clone Wars when she wore this outfit. But I am so glad to finally add her to my collection after all this time. And then in the $5 bin at Selfish, I found the absolute best action figure I never knew existed. Ladies and gentlemen, I present to you J. Jonah frickin' Jameson, the action figure. This is the publisher of the Daily Bugle from Spider-Man. He is, a little senile, a little unhinged. He's always yelling at everybody and firing people and then forgetting he fired them and writing bad editorials about Spider-Man, who he considers a menace. I don't trust anyone but my barber. So this is a really just bizarre figure that I just had to own. I just want to set J. Jonah Jameson up somewhere to eternally yell at me in plastic action figure form. As a former reporter at a newspaper, I just had to get this. I just had to get the crazy old senile publisher. So this is fun. And so those two action figures are from the more polished, bigger comic shop in our area called Selfish Comics. And then in Winston-Salem, there's also a comic shop called Classic Comics. And that's where I went next. And they are a smaller comic shop, but they have a ton of stock. It's not necessarily the best organized stock ever. It's kind of like going into someone's attic, but it's like a treasure hunt every time you go in there. And every time I go in there, if I look, I'm going to find something amazing. So what I found this time was Hawkman. These are the original appearances of Hawkman reprinted in probably 1990, I would guess, would be when this trade was produced. And so these are by Gardner Fox, who created Justice League, as well as Joe Kubert, who is a legendary comic book artist, best known for Sergeant Rock. And so this is a character I've always loved, but just never got around to getting comics of him for some reason. Unfortunately, by the time I was collecting comics, he'd been revamped as Hawkworld, and it just grim, gritty, just not very good. Hawkman on heroin. But the original concept is where it's at. As far as Qatar Hole, the Silver Age Hawkman. It's basically him and his wife are intergalactic cops with wings, and they go around and they fight alien criminals on Earth. Coolest thing in the world. Looking forward to finally kind of reading some of their adventures. So I mentioned Jim Shooter a couple minutes ago when I was talking about Valiant Comics, and he's one of my favorite writers of all time. And so at a convention last month, I was fortunate enough to pick up one of the hardcovers reprinting the very first things he wrote. This was Legion of Superheroes. He wrote back when he was a teenager. He actually started writing professional comics at 13 years old. What have you been doing with your life? But this is this is the first time I ever actually got to read his old stuff back from Legion of Superheroes in the 60s. And what I found today at Classic Comics was this. This is a Treasury Edition reprint of 2 issues he wrote, and it is amazing. This is Curt Swan artwork. Gosh, let me show you. Wraparound cover with all these freaking Legionnaires on it, like just fantastic. And then, I mean, it's just like really cool. I mean, look at the size of this page. I mean, you can just see all the detail in the artwork. It's just really, really cool. I mean, they would just reprint issues like this big. And, you know, it even has like the diagram of the Legionnaires headquarters and stuff. And it's just really, really cool. I was just so super surprised to find out this even existed, and they gave it to me for like $5. How great is that? I am so super happy to own this. And lastly, to continue with that Jim Shooter theme, I found this 3-pack of comics that were sold in, I believe there was a drugstore, maybe Revco or somebody, who was selling these back in the 90s. These were Defiant Comics, which was a company Jim Shooter started in the 90s after he got kicked out of Valiant. And so it's got Good Guys #1, which is a fantastic issue, Warriors of Plasm #5, and also Dark Dominion #3 in here. And it's promising me on here, it says that there are trading cards in here. And I want to see what those look like. So I'm going to open this up and we're going to take a look. All right, so I went ahead and cut the packaging. And so let's just see what we got here. Pull it out. And so let's see here. Got the comics, and oh, here are the cards. Oh, I don't know if I have these. I don't. Yes, I got something new. You don't understand. I have scoured eBay for quite a few years, probably about 5 or 6 years ago, looking for like just any odds and ends from Defiant. And so I thought I'd kind of gotten everything. So it's like really surprising to see these different cards I've never seen before. So this is really cool. So these will just pull right off of here, I think. Yeah, they will. So here are the cards. I did end up, unfortunately, damaging the one in the middle, Mr. Fingerman, who was a villain in Good Guys. That's unfortunate, but it was pretty much the only way I could remove it from that card back, unfortunately. But it's still cool to have them. It's still cool to know that these exist and finally get to know what this creature was. This was something that appeared in promotional art for Dark Dominion, and I never knew that it was an actual character in the series called Steam Pit. So that's kind of cool. And so that's everything I wanted to show you guys for my free comic book day haul. By the way, this is actual real paper that's rolled up that J. Jonah is holding. So that's a really nice touch. This is a Toy Biz figure. I assume it's probably from the 90s. So it's really cool. So anyway, J. Jonah says, like and subscribe for more videos, or I will fire you. I do not care if you do not work for the Daily Bugle. I will still find a way to fire you. So like and subscribe, or else, Parker, you hear me? You better like and subscribe. So you heard him, guys. Don't make J. Jonah mad, okay?